Your vet's advice is optional. If you're a guardian, whether it's for a child or an animal, you do need to ask the questions and be sure.
People sometimes are afraid to speak up. They worry that they'll upset their veterinarian. They're primarily vet pleasers and then secondary pet parents. And I think that the hierarchy definitely has to reverse.
Controversial opinion. I think marriage is really, really important. I would want it to be taken a little bit more seriously.
I get really frustrated when people say, you're giving your dog organic food? Of course.
One of my friends said to me, she said, well, you really do think your animals were as important as the human? I said, well, of course.
Like, how can someone think that we humans have been entitled to this whole planet and everyone else needs to submit or is lower than us? It's such an arrogance. Like,
it is incredible.
Hello, my dog lovers. I am so excited today because I have my dear friend, Catherine Edwards here, who is a holistic biologist, healer, and podcaster. Hi, Catherine.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm great because I'm actually getting in touch with you. And we haven't talked for some time. And every time we get together, I feel like we have a really good conversation. So, I'm really excited to have you here. And for those of you who don't know you, how would you introduce yourself? What should they know about you?
Oh gosh, I'll keep it brief. In my current role, where I am at this stage in my life, and actually where I've been for quite a while, I work holistically with animals and humans. And what I mean by that is I keep a really up to date in terms of what the modern challenges are facing us all. 2026 is a different toxic soup we're all sitting in for all sorts of reasons to what it would be, say, 100 years ago. So, what I help people do is rebalance their animals and themselves naturally using a whole range of different therapies and approaches, everything from animals self-medicating, communication, detoxing safely, diet, exercise, to even looking at the EMFs around us and the lights we all sit on and the impact that has on our biology. So, and I'm also a podcast host. And the reason I do the podcast is because I get to speak to amazing people like you from all over the globe. And I'm so passionate about learning. And for me, there's no better way to learn than to hear straight from the horse's mouth and have these interesting conversations on all the sorts of issues that are affecting all of our daily lives.
You mentioned two things, toxic soup and animals self-medicating, which makes me really curious. Tell me more about the toxic soup, how you see it, because, when we mention a term or there's more behind the word. So tell me more.
I think nowadays a lot of people are getting quite aware that our environments are really challenging to live in for ourselves and very much our animals. And I'll come on to in a minute about how sometimes our animals pick up a lot more toxins than we do. But most of our food is sprayed with every possible chemical under the sun before it gets to us, and it's nutritionally depleted. Our water isn't clean anymore. And by what I mean by clean, it's not necessarily going to give you cholera, but it's full of chemicals that none of us would want in our water. Our skies are being sprayed, which affects all our water courses, all our food and everything that we breathe in and the plant life. And those are some of the obvious things around our house. When you look around your house, the cleaning products, the sprays on your furniture that are giving off toxic endocrine disruptors, EMFs, non-native EMFs, have a huge impact on biology. And actually, even the lighting, a lot of the LED lighting that a lot of people and a lot of animals find themselves under for long periods. And humans and animals were so resilient. However, there's a tipping point. There's always a tipping point. And I'm sure you see with your work and the listeners see in their lives that however much we seem to be doing right, these problems can still hit us and our animals. And what we used to be able to rely on as good old common sense, like get a great fish oil for your health or your dog's health, we can't rely on anymore because a lot of the fish oils are farmed fish that are highly toxic and highly polluted. So whereas some of the solutions used to be a lot easier for us, now you almost need a chemistry degree to go into a supermarket and work out what food's safe to buy.
Hmm. Hmm. It's complicated. And do you think where we're standing now, do you think that we worry about the right things, or how much, like if I was a dog lover without having, let's say, veterinary background or medical background, like it must be confusing for people to actually know what they really should worry about, because I think that the information paralysis is real. I think that people really start looking into all sorts of different directions and feel completely overwhelmed. So if there is a simple advice that you give to your listeners on your podcast and to your community, how would you address this toxic soup? Like, should they worry about everything, or is there something that is really predominant from your point of view? Because I do have an idea, or kind of like an idea, an opinion, but opinion is just a point of view. It's not true. So I'm super curious to see what you think.
I think there's some common themes, but I think it's really important today to really look at every human and animal as an individual. So there's absolutely core principles like food, species appropriate diet as clean as possible, good quality water, exercise, which is often very much overlooked. But equally, if I'm dealing with a client, I was on the client call to someone in the middle of India, in the middle of a huge city about their dog's health. And that would be very different to if I'm speaking to someone who's living in the middle of nature.
Mhm.
So for me, I think one of the problems that you just picked up on there so well is information overload is so real for people. And everyone has got an opinion. It's spread all over social media. A lot of times things aren't backed up, and it's really confusing with people. So
Mhm.
the main advice I do is take it right back to simplicity. We all know real food. We do know what real food looks like. People say, what did your grandma used to eat? Does it grow on a tree, grow in the ground, run on two legs, fly or swim? And if it doesn't, it's not real food. And really just get the basics right, because animals are very resilient. We're very resilient. We can adapt to living in this modern toxic soup. But if we don't get the basics right, we're in trouble. And I think sometimes it can be very easy. The animals are a bit like the canary in the cage, because often their lifespans are shorter. They show the problems before the
Mhm.
humans. So we might hit some problems in middle age, and a dog you might start seeing issues develop around 5 or 6. But if you can get there and prevent the problems happening in the first place to the best of our ability. And the other thing is I think there's so much guilt out there, Peter, for people. We're not looking for perfection. We don't all have to have perfect diets, but we do need to keep learning and realizing that the food chain isn't what it used to be like. The water is contaminated. So taking some basic steps to protect, whether it's your four-legged friend or your two-legged family, is really important. So it's very overwhelming, and I think sometimes people need to step away from the noise, go and sit in the garden for an hour and just think, right, if I go
Mhm.
back to good
Mhm.
old common sense, what are the few things that I can really concentrate on that are going to have the biggest impact for my dog's health and my own health? Because they're always linked.
From what you're saying, it makes me feel like it aligns where you want to do the least things to make the most difference. People say, let's do the 20% of the possible available, or take 20% of the steps and make 80% difference. And that's my philosophy, because we often, or I see people actually going either into this kind of obsessive mode of measuring every single nutrient and just going
Yeah.
crazy, or going to the other extreme where they are so overwhelmed that they don't want to see what is happening, and almost like, what if I do something wrong, so I will do nothing? And that's actually, so those are the two extreme. When with my clients, I used to have this saying, listen, like, we can't really know it all, but if you follow certain principles, certain basic principles, you will likely yield the results. I just happen to have a really interesting, just kind of heartwarming situation. I run into a review on our website from a long-time client. I started working with her in the early 2000s, and she's visually impaired. She can't see, and she's one of my most lovely and memorable clients. And she's had 4 service dogs, and the first one died at 10 or 11, the second one 13, and the third one 15 or 16, and now she's got a 17-year-old dog, and she's still alive. And so I can see that she's actually learned enough to actually be empowered. And it's not like she's measuring everything and doing, but she understands the core principles of maintaining health, and it seems to be working out so beautifully. And this is what I see generally. So I think that, I always joke that maybe a little bit of benign neglect is okay, right? Benign neglect, but, focusing and sorting out really, it's more about prioritizing and also knowing who to listen to. Because just yesterday, I had a situation where my neighbor went to the veterinary clinic because their dog had pancreatitis. And the pancreatitis was diagnosed, and the instructions, among others, were feed the dog right away, and make sure that your dog doesn't move at all, and make sure that your dog doesn't eat grass. And I go, wow, that doesn't make sense, because rice is hyperglycemic, so stressing the pancreas with more sugar is not really good. If my dog doesn't move at all, like gently, that's not really good either. And grass eating is actually natural selection, as you say, which we are getting to the next next topic,
Yeah.
and that is dogs self-medicate. So, I think that sometimes just kind of like using common sense, but how do people know? Like, I always wonder and kind of get a little frustrated when the community members, dog lovers, get an instruction that comes from a professional, but it's not really solid. How do they recognize it? How do you recognize it when you go to a vet? Like, what questions do you ask when something just doesn't sound right? Or you have a knowledge of, let's say, rice being hyperglycemic, and suddenly you're told that you should be doing that or feeding rice at times for pancreatitis. How do you deal with that as a
It's so,
healer and also
yeah.
dog lover and pet parent?
Yeah, it's such a good question, Peter. And for me, it's quite hard for me to step into other people's shoes to realize that they don't question. My strapline for my podcast is expanding consciousness through curiosity. And asking questions to me has never been a bad thing. I think the trouble is now we live in a society where people are offended so easily for a different opinion. And it's like when you go to a vet, I mean, I'm very, very lucky. My horse vet and my small animal vets, both amazing people. So, I have no problem with them at all. But I always ask them loads of questions. So, for example, if you take your dog to a vet and it's being sick and they want to give it an anti-sickness drug, I can remember asking the vet and saying, well, hang on a minute, if it's being sick and it's got something in there it needs to get out, why do we want to suppress that? But I'm not saying it from a question of like, I'm right, you're wrong. It's a genuine question. Can you run me through the pros and
Yeah,
cons
yes.
so I can make an informed decision? And I think a lot of people are very quick this day and age, and I'm old enough to have not grown up like this, where we used to take responsibility for our decisions if you're an adult. So your vet's advice is optional. Unless there's a cruelty case, and of course then that's different. But for most owners, it's an opinion. It's a thank you very much. Most of the time, you can go away and think about it and go and do some more research and see. Ask your vet to send you more information. So I do feel sometimes, and people might hate me for this, but I honestly feel sometimes we need to be a little bit more grown up about it and realise that if you're a guardian, whether it's for a child or an animal, it's your responsibility to advocate. And you absolutely, no one will ever know everything. A vet won't know everything, you won't know everything. But you do need to ask the questions and be sure, because some decisions, if you don't ask the question and something goes into your animal that's not reversible, it's too late then. Other things are less drastic and you can learn from experience. But I think for people not opening their minds, if everything's going really well, like your client who's got a 17-year-old dog, she's obviously making some very good decisions there. It can be
Yeah.
fluke, but you're making some good decisions to keep going. Now, most people are curious enough to say, what can I do next? But if things are not going well, and I think most people that I deal with obviously come to me because there's problems, it's not about blaming yourself, but it's about saying, I have to be honest, what I'm doing at the moment isn't working. I need to
Mm.
open my mind to trying something else, and being open to hear different opinions, take them away, see what resonates, take what resonates, and feel free to leave what doesn't.
Yeah, so it's almost like face the music without blaming ourselves
Yes.
for the situation. I've noticed that at least based on what I'm hearing from my community, that people sometimes are afraid to speak up, or they worry that they'll upset their veterinarian, and so it's almost like they step away from being dog parents primarily, and they're primarily vet pleasers, and then secondary, they're actually pet parents. And I think that the hierarchy definitely has to reverse. I always say to my clients and the community that we are at their service. It's not that we should actually dominate the conversation. We are basically not any different as if we went to a restaurant and ordered a meal, right? Or go to a hairdresser. Obviously, it's much more complicated and also important, I would say, than hair. Speaking of me, obviously, health is more important than hair. It's been a long time, but anyway, what I wanted to say is that people really need to reverse the priorities and be a little daring. And I think that it comes from a little bit from the Anglo-Saxon culture where people actually like to please each other and don't want to speak
Yeah.
directly. But now when I'm thinking of, let's say, the Bohemian or Czech culture, because Czech in translation is Bohemia, uh, I can see that people also worry or are afraid to speak up with the doctor. And I think that it needs to change. Like we need to kind of shift the focus, I think, a little bit from pleasing to really be there for animals and asking the right questions. Now, we were talking about the grass and self medication. I know that you love this topic. So, why don't you just tell me a little bit more about pharmacognosy? It's hard to pronounce for me as an ESL
Yeah.
person. But pharmacognosy, right? That's closely to it. Is it?
Absolutely. I mean,
Okay.
the thing I love, Peter, about the zoopharmacognosy and the applied zoopharmacognosy, which basically means animals self-medicating, and this applies to us as well. We just perhaps aren't as in tune with ourselves as many animals are. The thing is that most of the medications come from what's growing in nature, and then pharmaceutical companies isolating, looking at what certain plants do in nature, and then trying to isolate and replicate that in a lab so that obviously they can patent it and sell it. But there's so many studies on zoopharmacognosy to show how animals will self-medicate when they're given free choice. So in the wild, obviously the animals are hopefully in the environment that's most suited to them, and there's examples where if they've got parasite infections, they'll eat certain leaves which have got hooks on them that then they'll sick up with the parasites. If they poison themselves, they'll eat certain clays to neutralize the toxins. If they're deficient in certain plants, they'll pick very, very rarely, only certain members of the herd or the tribe will pick certain substances. And this is because we tend to, as humans, a lot of us are used to going into the grocery store and buying something in a bag or a package or something. But in nature, everything is giving off a vibration, it's giving off a
Mhm.
scent, it's giving off an energy, whether you want to look at the morphic resonance. And actually, all animals are picking up all of those clues. And for most of the animals, certainly for dogs, the smell is their dominant sense. So they're living in a different world that most of us humans can't even appreciate. They've got so many more smell receptors in their nose. They can smell so much more than we can. And so when we can't let our animals live back in nature, we have to bring nature to them. And when you learn the certain properties of essential oils, clays, herbs, etc., and can learn how to safely read your animal's responses, you can often find that really difficult conditions that you're just playing guesswork and you've tried everything,
Mhm.
if you allow
Mhm.
them to self-medicate, and we can, as I say, we can do that with herbs, essential oils, clays, anything natural that they might incorporate find in the wild, you'd be absolutely amazed at how quickly they can bring themselves back into balance. But you do have to exert caution, because it's easy, if you're not trained, to read the responses wrong.
Hmm.
And also, you
Hmm.
have to bear in mind they can only select from what you're offering them. So if you've got a very narrow range of substances to offer, they will often pick the next best thing to what they need.
Hmm.
And one of the things I love this is every single person who sees one of these sessions in practice, without fail, is completely blown away, because it very much, from a human perspective, we've we don't work like that anymore. And we also confuse food, or the food like stuff we find at the shops, with the medicinal, which we commonly call herbs. So we're not talking about going in and selecting a hamburger and saying I'm self-selecting a packet of salt and vinegar chips. Not at all. We're talking about the secondary metabolites that are, we would call, medicinal properties, that, one animal's medicine is another's poison, that they will only select not to keep, not as a foodstuff, to actually bring their body or mind back into balance. It's incredible. Have you ever seen it in practice?
I have seen it. I have seen it, but I have so many more questions. But so it's not junk food cognosy basically. That's people
It's
can't
not
like make an excuse. People can't make an excuse that they kind of they need the chips or the Coke or the sugar, right? That's what we were talking about. But I love he kind of like reminding us that animals are really connected to nature and
Yeah,
the universe much more, and that we have disconnected. Possibly, our mind is very interesting because it's a great tool, but it also has the potential to disconnect us from this intuition, from nature's wisdom. And I think that it's like a double-edged sword that we possess.
mm,
Can you give me an example of any situations where you've witnessed amazing, interesting, curious situations, stories in that
mm.
area?
I've got so many examples. Do you want me to pick a behavioural one or a physical symptom?
How about one of each? That would be
Okay,
perfect.
so one of each. So, years ago, just after I qualified, I was working with a client that had a show Labrador, and it had horrendous skin issues. And they had been to every expert in the UK, literally, and the dog was just getting worse and worse, had been on every medication you can imagine. And the lady was actually going to have the dog put down, because the dog was in so much distress.
Mm, mm,
And she actually got persuaded to have a zoopharmacognosy session by a friend. She was not very open to it at all, but
mm,
her friend was like, "This is the dog's last resort, give it a go. What have you got to lose?" Anyway, this dog primarily just selected really good quality organic spirulina and rosehip shells. And initially, when it first selected the spirulina as a paste mixed down with water, it purged and it brought up this huge amount of mucus that had been sitting in its stomach. The dog was actually kibble fed. Anyway, to cut a long story short, 4 weeks of her offering, and because she wasn't very open, Peter, we kept it really simple, really, really simple. We just worked on the physical symptoms, not on the emotions and the behaviors as well. And so all she did was every single day offer her dog a really good quality spirulina mixed into a watery paste and rosehip shells. And within 4 weeks, the dog had completely recovered. I mean, its hair hadn't completely grown back, but the beautiful new hair coming through, skin clear, and it never came back again. And that dog went on to have another 5 or 6 years of life, and the problem never came back. She was a complete convert after that, because she had no faith that it was going to work at all. So that was a very simple but very effective. Another one that I had, really, really sad. This was a rescue dog that had had a terrible, terrible background, and it was so nervous and so reactive. And the owner brought it in for a couple of different sessions, because with something like that, it's not a one and done, and very much you're teaching the owner how to continue to work with their dog in their own environment. But this dog selected essential oils to inhale. Now, when we inhale,
mm,
when any animal inhales volatile substances, they bypass the blood-brain barrier and get straight into the limbic region of the brain, and they can have profound releases. Anyway, we worked with a couple of essential oils in the first session with this dog, and it was trembling. She couldn't take it anywhere. It was whining. It was okay when it was in the house just with her. She couldn't really have visitors coming in. After the first session of selecting a few different emotional releases and the lady taking some home and continuing to work with it, in that session, it walked out a completely different dog, got up, licked my hand, wagged its tail at me. Never done that. She'd never seen it do that to anyone. Anyway, over the course of the week, she continued to work with it. She then had a visitor. Her daughter came over from New Zealand to visit with 2 very young children, and she wasn't going to be able to let the young children in the house. This dog coped absolutely brilliantly. It wasn't coming up and wanting to be with the children, but it was fine, didn't exhibit any majorly stressed behaviours. And then after the third session, because we went through several different oils, that dog was then able to live a very normal life. It was the most incredible transformation. And she'd had this dog 5 years and done loads of work with it. I mean, she'd done Teleton Touch, she'd had it checked by a chiropractor, she'd had some really good behaviourist in, and she'd had subtle shifts with all those, but nothing that actually released the trauma, and the dog started to really have a real vibrancy and joy for life. It was amazing. She still sends me pictures
Wow.
now.
Beautiful stories. The first one, when you said that the dog ate spirulina and then threw up a whole bunch of junk and kibble. It's actually, I, as soon as you said that,
Well,
I could smell the kibble.
it
If
didn't,
there's
no, it didn't throw up kibble. It threw up a huge amount of mucus.
a mucus, so it was just like a purging, but
Yeah,
still, it was a response and reaction that was once again cleansing. I guess from both of these stories, I can see that we need to have an open mind,
yeah.
and when we see that someone is not open-minded, how do you approach it? Do you go like, how do you? ap- I know that you want to help and that you're very kind, generous with your time and energy, and really take it seriously. If there is someone who is not open, doesn't have open mind, how do you approach it? Like, I'm sure that there's many team members, not team members, but community members who run into these situations. Like, what is your approach to a mind or person who is less open-minded?
First and foremost, I don't work a lot with the zoo pharmacognosy on one-to-one sessions anymore, not because it's not the most amazing therapy, but because most humans will not follow up on it.
Hmm.
You know, if you're not going to offer, they don't do it. So most of my work now is online with people all over the globe. And the way I approach it is everyone's got different belief systems. So it's that finding that balance of understanding what their main concern is. And if they're asking curious questions for them, to say, look, you know, what does resonate? What are you prepared to try and start with? And just start there. So I'm always aiming for progress within something that can just challenge their belief systems to make them try something different. That's why they're coming to me. You know, they've often people come to a holistic practitioner after they've exhausted all other options, unfortunately. We do often, you know, some people are great and they'll come to start their animal off right, but most people come because they've got a really serious problem that they haven't resolved conventionally. But when people aren't open-minded, it's really, for me, it's asking questions that get them to think about things in a different way. Sending them information. Everyone's different. Some people love the science behind things. So, if, for example, I can say, look, you know, let me send you some research about what's in your food and what's
Hmm.
in that particular medication or that particular flea product or that particular vaccination. So some people can work on a scientific level with and say, right, I can send you the evidence. Other people are much more intuitive and they'll go with their gut feel. So I think that's why you can't get all the answers from social media and generic advice, because everyone's situation is pretty unique in terms of their belief systems, whether their personality, like you said, is really important to, do they feel comfortable asking questions? And I feel very sorry for vets this year at the moment, because a lot of people will go in and see a vet, not ask them these questions, and then blame the vet when something's gone wrong.
Mhm.
Whereas
Mhm.
actually, it should be a relationship. I have never ever had an experience with any vet where I've asked them questions and they've taken offence to it, ever.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I think if you
Um,
ask in a genuine, curious way, most vets can be quite open, and if not, it's time to find a new vet.
I must say that as a vet who is sometimes exposed to situations where, I don't know, my friends have a medical situation, they want a second opinion, they want me to talk to their veterinarian when the results are obtained or treatment is established, and I start asking questions. I must say that it's usually the less experienced colleagues who are younger who get actually offended about me asking, let's say, is this the best medication that we can give, or is it, can we actually look for different pain control that doesn't have ABC side effects and so on. I actually just happened to be in that situation yesterday. That's why it kind of sparked that thought. I think that as we gain experience, we don't get offended because we know that questions are actually fine. So if anyone's veterinarian is actually not open to questions, if they get agitated, irritated, you have two choices. You just kind of, finish the appointment and wrap it up and then have to weigh whether this relationship is, as you say, right for you. I think that it's really nice for you to actually point to the fact that some people are scientifically oriented, others
Mm,
are emotional, or they like to go with their intuition, and just kind of gauging where they're coming from and also what their fears and goals are, right? Like I sense that sometimes it's more important to even understand what people worry about and what their fears are, because they may have had another experience. Let's say they had a dog that passed away from a
yeah.
spleen tumor or something like that, so they worry about that first, and you know that you need to actually kind of give them the information so that you put their mind at ease. I call it the curative ultrasound, for example, right? If somebody's worrying about tumor and we do an ultrasound, there is nothing, then suddenly everything resolved because the guardian, the pet parent, stops worrying. And so that's an interesting one. And even more so, I can see that you definitely build the personal connection with your clients and with your pet parents. And I think that that's just such an important part, because if we don't really build a personal connection, then we cannot really make as much difference in the process of healing. And so that's what I've always admired on you, because you are not only very, you come across as a person who's very grounded and who's wise. I think that's the word that I'd like to use, and at the same time you are great in making these connections. And every time I talk to you, I go, wow, I love being around you. And I think that for your clients and customers, that's one of the things that they need to feel like you like to spend time with them and they like to spend time with you. And also, it's not about the healer, right? It's not about you and I. It's about really the primarily the animal friend, and then about the pet parents. And so that's really it's something that I really value on you. I want to ask one more question, and that is, when can people learn, or where can people learn about pharmacognosy? See, I'm stumbling again with the word, but that's okay. Where can they learn about this? And I think that it's a great way of empowering pet guardians.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important that they do learn. It's not something you can get a little information and go away and do. So I've got a website where I've got courses and consults on there, and I have two zoopharmacognosy, well, actually three courses on there. Two are for horses and one is for dogs. And it's a pretty extensive for people that want to work with their own animals. It's not a professional qualification, and it's got videos, it's got PDFs, it's got demonstrations, it's really comprehensive. So if people go to my website, catherineedwards.life, Life, they'll find the courses section. If you want to become a practitioner, the best person to train with is Caroline Ingraham. That's who I trained with, and I know you've met Caroline, and she runs accredited practitioner courses. So, but it's something I would encourage everyone to understand, because when you've got those toolkits, one of my biggest frustrations, Peter, I mean, before I work with people, they fill out a very detailed consult form so I can see where they're at, what they're needing help with. And I always offer a free Connect Zoom or call with people so that we can see if there's a right fit. Because the great thing is nowadays there's so many people out there to fit different belief systems, different approaches. So finding someone you feel comfortable with, and I'm never offended, you know, if I'm not right for them, I normally know someone that is, because there's a lot of people out there that are looking to help people with their animals.
That sounds great. If you had an opportunity to put a message on a billboard at Times Square for pet lovers, what would it be?
Oh my God, that's such a good one. If I can just have one. Spend more time with your animal. I think it's so important that people really have that connection with that animal, quality
Mhm,
connection,
mhm.
you know. So it would be spend quality time with your animal of whatever species. I've got guinea pigs, I've got horses, I've got dogs, I've got cats. But the reason I say that, Peter, is I think so many people are addicted to this. And I live in a beautiful part of the countryside, and I would say 90% of people I see out walking their dogs are on their
On the
phones and
phone.
not connected with their
Mhm,
dog at
mhm,
all. And when you have
mhm.
that connection and you have that, whether it's one on one, whether you've got multiple animals, it's not about the length of time, it's that you'll focus on them, because then you'll notice the little things that are going wrong. You'll notice how they are emotionally, and they just want to be with you, and their lives are generally pretty short compared to humans anyway. And just be focused, be present with them.
So spend time with your animal friend, and actually, it kind of extends even beyond spend time with those you love.
Yes.
So I think that would be a great billboard for me. Um, Pax, my dear dog, who's come with many lessons, who I've been able to use to help others. He is extremely cuddly. We actually, I make a very conscious kind of schedule plan to not only go for walks but also have cuddle time, because people sometimes think that dogs just need to constantly walk somewhere or do something or exercise. And he taught me that actually just spending time, just sitting down and watching the waves, or he loves to kind of lie on his back. Like every time I say, "Oh my goodness," he would actually flop on his back and just kind of want to be scratched. So it just started as a cute little comment, and now it's a routine. So he would actually lie in between my knees and I would scratch his chest, and he would sleep like that for 10, 15 minutes, not even moving. And I know that these are such special times. So if anyone has, I think that it's also about making sure that we do what our dogs love. Some dogs would really like to play, others would like to um, you know, chew bone and you're sitting beside them, or others just like to go on a hike. I understand that, but really recognizing what our dogs really thrive on and what they love, and then try to enrich their life by that. There was a behaviorist. Her name is Susan Garrett. I'm not sure whether you know her, but she's a high performance agility trainer and an amazing behaviorist as well. And we had to talk about enrichment, and uh, the conversation really stuck with me because she was saying just do what your dog loves to do. And so Pax likes to fish and likes to be in the water, so I make sure that he does have some fishing time. Or I know that he likes to chase his little toys when I move them quickly, because that's like hunting. So again, that's his natural instinct, so I do that for him. And obviously everything in moderation, not to overdo any of that, but it's really nice. What do your dogs and horses, by the way, love?
Yeah. Well, my dogs are both very different personality. They're sisters. They're from the same litter. They're rescues from Romania, but they weren't raised as a litter. They were raised in with 100 other dogs in a big rescue.
Mm-hmm.
So they haven't had that bond from young, but they're completely different personalities. So Lola, absolutely love her. She's so cuddly. She's like a working dog. She wants to be with me all the time. If I'm out here, she wants to be here. If I'm on the sofa, she wants cuddles and scratches. Indy, absolutely gorgeous, but she loves her basket and she loves to be quiet time. She doesn't like being outside as much as Lola. So very different personalities. They both
Mm-hmm.
love their walks. They
Mm-hmm.
are the fittest dogs I've ever had. I mean, they're nearly, I can't believe it. I think they're going to be 9 this year. We still call them the puppies. They've got perfect teeth. I mean, their teeth are just to die for. But their main things are walking, love running, love jumping, and then when they're in the house, Lola loves cuddles, Indy loves her bed, but none of them are toy focused. They both never wanted toys, not interested in toys at all. It's very interesting. And my horses are completely different personalities. I've got three, two are mine, and one is my friend's that lives with me, and they're so different. And Romeo, my New Forest that I got wild off the New Forest as a 4-year old, he's now 27. Um, he is my best teacher, Peter, because I cannot fake anything with him. If I'm in a bad mood or in a rush or grumpy, he tells me and he's like, no, no, no. I mean, one story, I know I'll keep it very brief for his time, but I used to lead all three out on grazing walks and herb sale selection walks through the woods, and they were so good leading all three. But once I was rude enough to answer my phone whilst I was leading them, and Romeo took off because he was like, that is so rude and disrespectful. And I kid you not, as soon as I put my phone down and said, I'm really
Yeah.
sorry, he came back. And so he's my biggest teacher because I can't fake it. If my energy is not balanced, he's like, go away, do some
Mm-hmm.
breathing, come back, and
Mm-hmm.
then come in. Whereas Charlie, my little rescue Shetland, he puts up with everything and he watches over the herd and he will never complain and he absorbs a lot of it. But he won't give me the feedback in the same way as Romeo is. He's almost like, okay, I'll be your counselor. I'll put up with it.
I,
So their personalities, and even the guinea pigs, their
yeah.
personalities are so different. So this is what I love, and they can all teach us so much. But what I love is I don't know anyone who gets offended when their animals give them feedback. Most of us
Mm-hmm.
humans, we can get very offended when humans give us feedback, but very few people get offended when their animals give them the feedback.
Yeah.
Lovely.
I love the animals, and I think that they also go through phases of evolution. Who knows whether there are several lives or many lives or just one life? It doesn't matter this much, but what I really love that I love to see animals actually having that sensitivity and also developing
Yeah.
the boundaries. There are some even breeds like golden retrievers that have very poor boundaries, and they're actually often get more sick than other breeds because they have this ability to absorb the energy from others. And then some others, they other dogs have good boundaries. For
Yeah.
packs, actually, I noticed that he, without any explanation, he would actually be drawn to some people and then would avoid another person. And it is weirdly enough, sometimes the people that I would expect he would love because they're pet lovers and pet parents and very dedicated, but there is this unsettledness or almost like dense energy within them, whatever life brought them, and so on. And he is very careful how he approaches different people. But when there is a group of youngsters who are carefree and flowy and so on, like he's right in the middle of them and just absolutely loves it. And so every time he comes to me for cuddle, I take it as a compliment. Or every time I go, okay, maybe I'm probably not doing that badly. But we always question, are we the right people for our animals? Are we doing a good job? All that, yeah, right? It's just so interesting.
Well, one of my favourite things that I do for work is animal communication, and it's actually my favourite way to work with the human animal bond because you couldn't make the things that the animals say up. You just couldn't. And people that are open enough to believe in animal communication tend to be very receptive and have hugely dramatic results when they open up to that. And I've been doing that for about 15 years now, and every single conversation is such a gift, and you learn so much. And the relationship between the people when they go down that route can be really fantastic. So I think they are always giving us communication, and they are changing. And I mean, the best communication I get is from my cats. I mean, absolutely hysterical.
People know me as a canine vet, and that I had a few traumatic experience with cat hoarders that kind of made me one day decide I'm not going to work with cats
Yeah,
anymore. But I wonder what cats would say. But, animal communication, I think that it may be, and tell me what you think, it may be a little misperceived because people think that the animals talk in full sentences, but it's more like a translation of the energetic quality that they're sending out? Is it like, how do you see it? Because I obviously it is not totally provable, but the results speak for themselves. So I do my best to be open-minded, and sometimes I go, "Wow, this is so amazing and profound." And at other times, I think that not everyone is a good animal communicator. Like not everyone is a good business coach or personal or therapist or whatever. How do people recognize a good animal communicator when they are thinking, "Well, I'd like to know what's going on, and maybe I'd like to get an insight and some wisdom." How do people recognize if a person really knows what they're doing or they're full of caca? Pardon my
yeah.
language. That's
I think no, it's very, very true. And what's very interesting is you could have three animal communicators talking to packs, and they would all have different conversations. So you're exactly right. It's not like us having a conversation like this, and different communicators will pick it up in different ways. Largely related to your personality, how you take in information, your knowledge base. So, because I've got a biological background with a lot of physiology, and I've trained in a lot of holistic therapies, I get very clear indications about physical things. I feel it in my body, and because I know where the spleen is, I can say, well, I think there's something in the spleen, or it's not diagnostic, of course, you can't diagnose diseases. And the other thing is it's a bit like if you've got your three best friends, Peter. You might have one friend that you might talk about relationship issues with. You might have another that might be more business focused conversations. You might have another one that you go out dancing with. They can all be good friends, but you'll have a slightly different relationship. It's a bit like that with an animal communicator. And bizarrely, when with me, 9 times out of 10, they'll always start by telling me something about their humans. And you know that you've got a good animal communicator if they tell you something that's normally unexpected. I mean, a dog would never tell me what their favourite feed bowl is because it's just not important to most dogs. But they'll tell you something really important that's going on with the owner's life that's affecting them, because our animals really do know what's going on with us often before we do. So I think having the trust, having someone that you feel that you've got the trust with, and most people I find that actually book an animal communication, they're open-minded. They want to experience that. And in terms of how you know, I think look for testimonials, but also have your expectations set, because, for example, some animals will just have some really key things that they want to get across. They're not what I would call, they're not gossipers. They're not going to talk about trivial things in their life. It could be a few really powerful messages. So it's not necessarily going to tell you. I always tell my clients very clearly, we always start with the communication with what the animal's priority is, so that they can lead the way, and then there will be plenty of time for you to ask questions once they've got off their chest what they need to. But it is a difficult one, and it's not for everyone. But I think in terms of the science, you see, I think it's interesting. There's loads of science now to back it up, and there's so much coming out about telepathy, how they can prove telepathy interspecies and between species. So of course it's not for everyone, but there is a lot of science to back it up for those that like that scientific perspective. My husband was a complete skeptic until one of our cats was run over and killed, and I was absolutely devastated because we literally moved to our house, Peter, to be as safe as possible for the cats, and one still got run over, and I was just absolutely
Mhm.
devastated because it was a beautiful young cat.
Yeah.
And I persuaded my husband we were going to have an animal communicator. He didn't believe it at all, Peter, even though he's a
Mhm.
very connected person with animals. And within 10 minutes of the communicator being here, he was literally speechless because what came through from a dead cat, you couldn't have made it up. There was no way. We didn't tell I mean, the communicator knew the cat was dead and he knew he'd been run over. That's all
Mhm.
he knew. He knew nothing
Mhm.
else at all. And my
Yeah.
husband now was a complete convert because the information that came through wasn't anything that was generic at all.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I had personal experiences that were similar. I also had an astrologer consultation a long time ago, maybe 10, 15 years ago. It was so interesting how he outlined what happened in the past, and he had no information about me. And once again, it wasn't generic. And even about animal communication, I think that our animals are really like somehow, we don't really know how the universe works, and it's may be mystery for the rest of our existence. But I do think that the animals are channeling some sort of universal wisdom, and that they do have messages. And when they come to us, they almost have a purpose to serve, to kind of improve improve our being, make sure that we are better human beings, and so on. And so I'm just kind of observing and listening to it, and it's really lovely to know that you're providing these services. So we'll definitely make sure that we'll put the links in the description of this video. And we were also talking about beautiful teeth, so I'm going to put a link on dental care and bones to the description as well, just to, and also Catherine. So your website for people to get hold of you is catherineedwards.life. Is that correct?
Yes, Catherine Edwards Dot Life. And I have to compliment you on your blogs, Peter. They're absolutely phenomenal. With my clients, I send a lot of clients to your website. I mean, obviously, we know your products are the highest quality out there, but your blogs are so informative and so helpful for people. So it's very rarely that I don't send clients to your website. So your writing is second to none and
Oh my
extremely
goodness.
valuable. So thank you
Um,
for that.
I'm my own worst critics, but there's more coming, and courses, education. We also have been doing hormone healthfordogs.org with Dr. Karen Becker. If anyone needs to know and understand the impact of conventional spaying and neutering on our health, on the health of our dogs, please go to hormonehealthfordogs.org as well. But all the links are in the description. And we're not done yet, Catherine, because I have this is one of the really fun parts of our conversation. This segment of my podcast is called Get to Know Your Vet, but also Get to Know Your Healer. And I definitely respect you as a healer very much. And I do believe that healing should not be just veterinary domain, but we should, similar to human healing, we should actually organize in a community of healers and veterinarians, and just kind of make sure that people have a nice, well-rounded opinion and can choose what suits with them, and also that we don't know it all. Like, I don't really know many human doctors who are also physical therapists and chiropractors and herbalists and naturopaths. And for some reason, it happens in veterinary medicine that some provinces or states even don't allow anyone else touch animals, which is kind of bizarre. And it's under the auspices of safety and making sure that they get the right care. But I don't really believe it, because humans are not considered any less important. I would, we could converse on that. But I do think that the protectionism that we see in veterinary medicine has to end, and the only people who can change it are the pet lovers, and make sure that everyone demands this freedom of choice. And so thank you for being part of that healing group. And so part of the whole thing is to get our questions here, get to know your healer a little more. So
Oh, what fun. This
we
is going to be fun.
we have a few questions. I've been using these cards because they have fun questions. You can also decide to skip a question. If you don't want to answer it, we're all free people. There's two options. I can mix them up and just take it from the top, or I can divide the stack and you can say left, right, or center, or inner, outer. What would you like to do?
I always like the approach where I've never seen these cards, but if ever I'm using cards for anything else, I'd like you to just, if you feel comfortable, hold them against your heart and then shuffle them and then just pick.
Oh my goodness, I don't really know how to shuffle, so I'll
But
hold
just
them
like
against.
that, I can't shuffle at all. Just hold them and then just mix them.
I think I can shuffle a little bit. Okay, I'll just
Well, that's
shuffle.
better than me. And
And
then
so
just
I'll
pick
just, at the bottom of the top.
top.
Okay, all right. See, like sometimes the questions are almost like, and I'm going to answer them too, because I think it's unfair to put you on the spot without putting myself on the spot. When you look in the mirror, what are you most afraid of seeing in yourself?
Oh, that's such a
I
good.
know. I may choose different cards next time.
I honestly, the first thing that comes to my mind is hardness. So I've always suffered from having a very expressive face. When I was in my corporate jobs, I couldn't lie if I thought someone was being an idiot. But with everything that's going on in the world and everything like this, when I look in the mirror, I don't want to feel it's hardened me. I don't want to look in the
Hmm.
mirror and
Hmm.
see the compassion in my face gone and that it's just that stern shutting the world out sort of look. Does that make sense? So I just want
It
to
makes
describe
absolute
everything that's
sense
going
because,
on.
strangely enough, the first thing that came for me was I don't want to ever see myself stop caring.
Yeah.
There's this person, homeless person in the neighborhood, and he's got a little doggy, lovely little doggy that is doing an amazing job looking after this homeless guy. And this homeless guy is on a wheelchair and he doesn't have legs, believe it or not. And so I see them wheeling around on regular basis and we stop by and we talk to them and food and stuff is being made. But I often wonder, like, and sometimes I'm rushing and I go like, oh my goodness, like he hasn't been here for 5 days, suddenly he appears and I don't have anything in the car to give him. And I don't want to give him money because he drinks as
Mm.
well, so that's not a good idea. But I know that overall the community kind of cares for him and we all kind of pitch in a little bit, and I hope that the social services are going to eventually actually do their job. He's talking about filling out forms and that he hasn't done it and so on, but I'm thinking like, does a person like that need to fill out a form? Like everyone sees that he doesn't have legs. So anyway, not this is a long answer, but I think that if one when one stops caring, it's actually really yeah, that's what I would not want to see in the mirror.
Mm. Mm.
There's a second side of this card, and that may be this one is a little lighter. Uh, if you had to redesign the institution of marriage, what would you alter?
Oh, well, I've been married for a very long while. We do joke because neither of us can find anyone else, but he does let the cat sleep on the pillow, so we're fine. What would I redesign about the marriage? Controversial opinion. I think marriage is really, really important. Now, I don't think you should stay with an abusive partner, but I think I would want it to be taken a little bit more seriously than it is these days. So I would what would I redesign about it? I would redesign that, I can always remember my father, really believed that marriage was for life and through ups and downs and thick and thin. And I think there's so much to be said for that. Of course, there are exceptions, if it's an abusive situation, but I think I would redesign, I would make it more important in society. I think it's a very important institution, and I think you can learn a lot with it. And I think not giving up at the first hurdle is really, really important.
Hmm. Hmm. I like that. I would have everyone who is planning to get married, who's getting married, to take courses and tests in proper communication, nonviolent communication, learning how to listen, how to understand that what people are really saying behind the words, and all that. Recently, I sent an email. You can probably find it in your email box somewhere, on how I've been using the system of, actually you'll find it weird, but I've been using system of prompting AI to actually, in an unbiased way, to actually give me an advice how to solve certain situations.
Mm.
And my partner and I have been together for 24 years. And through that, we actually have resolved not only some of the challenges that we faced, but also our friends who were at the time when I kind of discovered this were here, and they sent me text messages saying, we just solved some of the most serious problems that we had, like through what we did. And it was really lovely. So I think that most problems are solvable, right? Unless someone is violent and has real serious issues that cannot be addressed. But I think that communication, like I would really have everyone learn how to communicate with each other, and also then how to be parents in a functional way.
Absolutely, absolutely. Be the communication. If we brought that into the schools, can you imagine
Ah,
the different
yeah,
place the
I
world
know.
would be?
I know.
Absolutely.
And they're teaching things that can everyone can find online, right? But they
Yeah,
don't teach the things that people need.
yeah.
It's, ah,
So frustrating, isn't it?
Yeah, but things are looking up. In the Czech Republic, the education system has always had a lot of tradition. And recently, I came across an app that was advertised on one of the Czech YouTube ads, and it was a school app that was actually done by the or sponsored by the government. And it actually teaches exactly that, and teaches kids to make decisions. Like, if they, I don't know, if they spend, like, let's say financial management, if they spend all the money on needing, they could buy themselves out of homework, right? And so they would do that, but then they would not have money to do something that was really important, right?
Yeah.
Fictional money. And so my friend, who's a teacher, and she's actually a great elementary teacher, she was just telling me how she's been using this app. And I was so thrilled because I saw this ad, I sent it to her. I said, listen, like, this is amazing. So actually, I'm seeing some glimpses in the educational system around the world that is already focusing on that, or health education and prevention and all that.
Yeah.
It would be important. Uh, shall we do a couple more cards? Would that
Yeah,
be
go
fun?
for it. Go for it. It's fun. It's
So
really interesting.
I'll shuffle again. I think that we don't get questions that we can answer. I believe that the universe just serves us what we can answer and what we can do. Catherine, it's just like all very personal, but we can tackle this. What would you like to change about yourself?
Oh, gosh. There's quite a few things actually. I think I've been working really hard over the last couple of years on communication. So that's a work in progress. Um, but I think the other thing is I have got the ultimate, I'm a rescuer personality. I've got so many rescue animals. I hate that term, rescue animals, but you know what I mean. They've come from rescue homes. And it can really take its toll. I think I can be, for my husband, quite hard work to live with because I probably over worry about people and animals and take on too much responsibility myself for it. So I'd like to change, not worrying quite so much, and letting people sort their own stuff out a bit more.
Mhm,
So not taking so much responsibility for everything that's going on in the world,
mhm,
lighten up a bit.
mhm,
I do have a lot of fun, but equally I can let events and situations and I think I'm the ultimate empath, and so I can take a lot of that on, and that can be quite heavy for people around me.
I can see that. I can see that. That's something that I see many rescues or people who care and caretakers actually deal with. I'd like to let things kind of not affect me as much when it comes to seeing these situations. You know, I'm not sure whether I mentioned it in this broadcast, but I had a neighbor, or I have a neighbor who uh, came with an emergency, called me actually. Her dog collapsed, kind of under the bushes. I ran up to their place and discovered that he had a bleeding tumor. Basically, I could recognize that he's got hypovolemic shock. So we took him to the hospital. The dog died, but I for about 2 or 3 years, I tried to actually gently, very gently nudge them to make some changes, and obviously they didn't. And this dog was on NSAIDs that actually increased the bleeding from the tumor. This dog could have probably had quality of life still, but it was a bad situation, and I get so sad and so frustrated, and I'm still not at that point where I can accept this as this is not my failure. I There was not the open door to actually for me to provide the information. So sometimes I blame myself for not being stronger. Like, should I have been more strong or something? But then when I have time to kind of like ground in the whole situation, I know that I can't really do it all.
Mm.
And so it's kind of similar to what you're
Yes,
saying in a way.
yeah,
So I'd like it to kind of like shut off me a little easier, because I think
yeah.
about it for weeks and sometimes months, and it almost feels like a little bit of the energy that I should put somewhere else where it really matters actually gets wasted on something that I can no longer change.
Yeah, very similar. Yeah.
Yeah. Huh. This is a good one. In what ways is your family especially odd?
Oh, so many ways. We are quite odd. My son who's living abroad at the moment for 2 years, he messaged you. We were messaging last night. He said, "Oh, you're so weird, Mum." And I said, "Thank you. That's so," because I say that as a compliment. So, um, I think our family, all my husband and I have got two children, and even my extended family were very totally obsessed with animals, and also I think very open-minded to things. I'm a scientist. I've been, studied science, so many different degrees and different things. But I also we're all very open to the more esoteric and spiritual side of things. So like the fact, so many of my science friends will say, "How can you talk about animal communication? That's ridiculous. That's not scientific." But so I think our family are quite weird that we've got both sides to us. We very
Mhm.
much sort of like the facts and the science, or show me the evidence, but equally we're very open to the connections and the things like animal communication
Mhm.
and picking up energy of the world around us, and both my children are very good at that as well.
Well, it means well-rounded, because I don't think that we should kind of shoot ourselves into the extremes. We should, like,
Yeah,
I think that I've been always saying that the truth is somewhere in the middle, and sometimes the up or down is right, or left or right. Like, it's just like it's actually truth is a ball where the truth is actually kind of like somewhere in the center. It is hovering in the center somewhere, and that's that's a weird analogy, but it just came to me. My family, we're especially odd in where we put our animal friends and dogs. I have almost no friends who say no dogs in my house. Like, I think that I
yeah,
grandfathered maybe a couple of friends, but we don't really ask whether our dogs can come. Well, sometimes I do, but I kind of assume that our dog is coming with us for a visit
yeah,
or for whatever is appropriate. Like, it's not going to be a loud concert, but anywhere else. And and I also feel I get really frustrated when people say, "Well, you're feeding your dog wild salmon, or you're giving this to your dog. You're giving your dog organic food."
yeah,
Course, like, of course, like,
yeah,
so I think that many people actually consider that really odd, really weird, that we have put animal friends on the same level, and if I am to be honest, on a little higher level than.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's that's how it goes. But anyway, it's been such a
I was
great.
just gonna say that is so interesting because ours is exactly the same, and we've had those conversations with friends. They cannot believe it, and one of my friends said to me, she said, "Well, you really do think your animals were as important as the human?" I said, "Well, of course,
Why
you
not, right? Like
not."
for me, it just
Yeah,
doesn't even compete. I go like, how can
yeah,
someone think that we humans have been entitled to this whole planet and everyone
yeah.
else needs to submit or is lower than us? It's such an arrogance. Like I
It,
don't really understand it.
it is incredible. So yeah, a lot
Yeah,
of similarities actually between our
yeah.
answers. That's really
Well,
interesting.
it's one of the reasons why we are friends and why
Mm.
we get along so well and why we have such great conversations. Thank you so much, Catherine, for being here, for inspiring me and making my day brighter.
Oh,
Also, for everyone who's listening, catherineedwards.life. And if you want to book animal communication session or any other methods that Catherine uses, please go to her website. And for those of you who want to check the dental care and bone feeding and hormone health for dogs, you can go to drpetertobias.com or hormonehealthfordogs.org, and the websites and links are in the description. Thank you so much, Catherine, and have a nice evening.
thank you, Peter. Thanks to everyone for listening.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thanks.